Welcome to Hermit Woods, where there's a story in every bottle. Okay, let's get started. This is Bob Manley. I am here from Hermit Woods Winery, and I have a very special guest with me today, which I'm really excited about and looking forward to sharing with you. Michael Fairbrother. He's the founder of Moonlight Meadery. He's an internationally renowned mead maker, and I can attest to that. I've had some of his products. He has lectured at Robert Mondavi Institute for Food and Wine. For Food and Science. He's been featured as a guest speaker in Chile, Argentina, Australia, and all over the United States. He has served as the president of the American Mead Makers Association. And Moonlight Meadery has sold over 1.5 million bottles and cans of mead and cider since starting their production in 2010. They feature over 60 varieties of meads and ciders in their Londonderry, New Hampshire tasting room. And Moonlight Meadery very recently won Best of Show in the Mead and Cider category at the San Diego International Competition. Michael started his meadery around the same time as Hermit Woods. And we got to know Michael around that time and have known him since. And Michael has been an integral part of helping us and an inspiration of helping us get our winery going. As with many members of the New Hampshire wine business, Michael's been very generous with his time and his knowledge, and always willing to share with us what he knows about the industry and the equipment that he uses, and any tricks he might be able to share from the cellar. So it's been a pleasure getting to know Michael. I consider him a friend, and he's a colleague in the industry, and he's also one of the hardest working people that I know. So without further ado, welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Bob. A pleasure to be here.
Excellent. We're glad to have you. Before I get into my questions, Michael, I just wanted to say a couple more words to the audience. If you are joining us today, we'd love it if you'd let us know. So if you just write in the comment section who you are, and if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put those in the comment section as well. We're going to break from the interview at a couple places and hopefully get to answer some of your questions live today. If we don't get to your questions, so don't worry, we will answer them as soon as the broadcast is over. Michael and I will take a look, and if there's anything we can answer, we will. Also, if you like the broadcast, share it with your friends. That way we get more people to join us on this conversation, the more the better. And so I think that's it, and we'll get started. So I'm gonna ask my first question here. So Michael, for many of the folks out there who don't know you yet, I know a lot of people do, tell us a little bit about your background. Where were you raised, and where'd you go to school, and a little bit of history before Moonlight Meadery?
Sure. I was born and raised here in New Hampshire. I grew up in Kingston, New Hampshire. I went to Sanborn Regional Seminary back in the day, class in 1984. I left high school to go to college. Went to Northern Essex College in Haverhill, Mass, and then Merrimack College in Andover, Massachusetts, getting a degree in computer science. Spent most of my career working as a software engineer. I got to work on the World Wide Web back when it was first being formed down at MIT and the likes. But basically, I worked real hard and found a real passion for brewing beer back in 1995. And I joined a homebrew club off the internet and bought a homebrew kit. Didn't know anything about fermentation science or what was needed, but I remember my father brewing beer when I was a young kid back in the mid '70s. So this was something that I thought was kind of a way to bond with my parents and my dad. And when I started, I remember my mother telling me, "You're never going to stick with this." Now look at me. But in July of 1995, I was at a joint homebrew club meeting between the Boston Work Processors and Brew for Your Die. That's a club I've been a member of now for 25 years. And somebody offered me a sizer. And I'd never heard that word before, and I didn't know what it was. But I was intimidated and didn't want to ask a question and make me look stupid, so I just passed my glass over. And if you've ever seen a little baby try something it loves, my eyes popped right up and I was smiling like, ear to ear. And I looked at him and said, "What is this?" He said, "An apple mead." I'm like, "What is mead?" He said, "A wine made from honey." Now, I was a beekeeper when I was in high school. I had my own 2 beehives. So I really learned meditative qualities of, beekeeping and how to take care of the hive and let the ladies do their job, and, the rewards of it, and not getting to panic when you're surrounded by bees, especially when you get one inside the bonnet. And she stung me right on the end of my nose. And your instinct is to pull that bonnet right off and kind of keep going. But that would have been a really fatal mistake. So that next day after that homebrew club meeting, I made 2 batches of mead. One was a traditional, so traditional mead is just honey and water. And the other one was a melomel, which is the category of fruit and honey. So a sizer is a type of melomel, but sizers are made with apples. And I chose to use pineapple instead of apples. Now, the disastrous mistake I made was the little chunks of pineapple that I used clogged up the blow-off tube, and the whole vat exploded all over the kitchen and onto the ceiling. And so I really had to, take a step back and tell people that the first few batches weren't all that great. However, if you come visit us in our Londonderry showroom, you'll see a picture of those first 2 batches of mead. Now, back then, none of us carried cameras around, so I had to go buy film, get it developed, and hang on to this picture for the last 25 years. But that's how much mead made a difference to my lifestyle, and that's kind of where we began.
That's great. I think almost every mead maker or brewer or fermenter that I know has an exploding bottle story or an exploding product story from the early days. So I was curious, in hearing you talk, you've always talked very passionately about brewing. And I think you kind of answered my question, but maybe there's more to it. You opened a meadery. You could have opened a brewery. You've been brewing beer for 25 years. What made you decide at the end of the day to choose a meadery instead of a brewery?
So back in 2007, I was looking at the onslaught of all these new breweries at the time and thinking, how good do you have to be to make exceptional beer, right? Because and it's gotten harder since. But I said, nobody is making mead like I was making. And I was winning best to show competitions all across the country. I've got, a showcase wall of so many ribbons and trophies now that I've won over the years. And it wasn't just all mead. It wasn't just all, it started with beer. I had a 20-gallon brewery built into the basement of my house. I had temperature-controlled conical fermenters. I had dry-clover clamp fittings. I mean, this is not what a home brewer typically does. But I wanted to do something like nobody else has done. And one of the research papers I was reading talked about if you could target your product towards women, you'd have exponential growth potential. And part of being a New Englander and knowing the story of Ben & Jerry's and watching what Steve Jobs did with Apple Computer is if you define the niche, you define the market, right? So I have, in one of my tenets of life is nobody ever does something they don't think is possible, right? So with all my heart, I believe I'm going to make mead another category of beverage, right? People think about beer, cider, wine. I want that 4th category to be mead. And I've traveled an awful lot around the whole country, working with distributors, meeting customers, meeting my fans, working with sales reps to talk and promote, because not all meads are equal, right? They don't all showcase the same. It's kind of like asking an artist, how does their art compare to somebody else's art, right? It's so much inflection on who the artist is. It's really not even a comparison. And if you look at how many, professional mead competitions we've won medals in, we've taken a medal every single year we've ever entered the International Mason Cup. There's only 2 or 3 in the whole world that can tell you that. And it's not that, it's a blind competition, so nobody knows what my entries are. The judges are judging it based on criteria. So they look at the aroma, the flavor, and the evaluation of where they come at it from. And, the first time I took a medal there, I was an amateur. And it just kept going. And then I became a professional and I kept still winning medals. It's a different competition between amateur side and professional side, but there are some mead makers out there that are keeping me working hard to continue. And I call them my colleagues, just like I consider you a colleague, which is, the world is too small to have competition. The world is all about how do we succeed, because there's an awful lot of alcohol being sold. And I don't ever anticipate or want to become a billionaire. My goal is just to do what I love and find a comfortable way to have a living.
That's great. Now, I'm just curious, did you ever think in the early days, before 1995, before you brewed your first batch of beer, did you ever think in your early years as a teenager, as a young adult, that you might be the owner of an establishment like you are now?
No.
Did that ever pop in your head?
No, not even close.
Not even close.
I wanted to be a chef. So at 14,
that's close.
It is close. At 14, I started working at the 1686 house over in Kingston, New Hampshire. And the owner at the time was Peter Speliotis. And I remember that first job like it was yesterday, because I used to ride my bicycle 6 miles each way, and sometimes got home at 2 a.m. after scrubbing pots and pans. And I was not even 16. So yeah, I was always been a hard worker. And that's one of the things I pride myself on, which is I may not be the smartest person in the room, but I know I can be the hardest working person in the room. And so that's really kind of been, one of those mind tricks that I play to make sure that I can be successful. And that's how and that's why I left the kitchen, was because it was too hot. And that's why I went into computer science. And my guidance counselor in high school said, don't go to computer school. You're never going to waste your parents' money, and you're never going to make it in computer science. Really, really encouraging news there. But like I said, I've went on to become a vice president and then a chief operating officer of a software company before, back in 2010. I'd been working on this plan. So in 2009, it was around September, I think, I'd won my a best of show for first place out of 353 entries from all over the United States and Canada with one of my Meads. And that's the one we started the company with. So I got in front of the town zoning board here in Londonderry to ask for a variance in my garage. My garage was 20 by 24 feet, so tiny, tiny, tiny. And it was my goal to just try to see if I could, make this work, right? I thought I was going to keep my day job. But as I was working through the business plan, I drew the numbers on the back of a napkin, and I said, this is going to work. But I couldn't sell it in 750 milliliter bottles, because there was no way I could make enough profit on those bottles to afford to live. So that's why we chose to go with a 375 milliliter format. And we were one of the pioneers in the state to go for offering pay for tasting options. I think you were as well one of the early ones that figured out, well, we can sell you the glass and you can keep the glass and bring it back. And, there's creative ways to think in this world. And nobody tells you how to think creatively, but they don't often get in your way when you've figured it out.
Mm. So I was going to mention that, I think about some of the greatest companies in this country, Apple, and I'm drawing a blank on all the others. Actually, Sierra Nevada Brewery, I think, started in a garage in somebody's backyard, or in the founder's backyard. So it's nice to know yours started in a garage too, and look at you now. You come a long way since those early days. And I remember that's when I met you, when you were still in your garage. And I remember you even then started to think, I don't know how I'm going to do this in this little space. But so you have come a long way. In the last 10 years, you've gone from working out of your garage to now selling mead all over the world. Did you imagine in the early days of your business plan, or the first year or so, that you were making mead, that you would be where you are today 10 years ago?
No, the difference of how I thought of myself back then was, I just said homebrewers at the time were making some incredible meads. And I just wanted to put quality first, right? Not worry about the cost, not worry about, having a living, just all in, make the absolute best that can be made. And we spare no expense when it comes to the honey that we use or the fruit. And we've learned a lot over the last 10 years. But I'm as proud of what we've done today or are doing today than what I was doing 10 years ago. But the passion that I have for this industry and for what I do hasn't changed one iota.
What were some of the greatest challenges that you faced in the early days trying to make it work?
Oh, there were lots.
I'm sure.
One of the first ones was that we were informed by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission that we could not make our #1 best-selling mead, our Kurt's Apple Pie, because it didn't have grapes in it. The alcohol content at the time was 16.5% alcohol. And the rules or the laws in the state of New Hampshire said you can sell that in New Hampshire, but you can't make it. So, because it had a grape, and must have been a grape wine. But I tried to explain that it's made from honey, and I don't want to dilute the alcohol down or dilute it with water. And one of my kindergarten best friends, Father Ken Weiler Sr., state representative from Kingston, and my Facebook plight was I need help, and he stood up and helped me get the law changed so that others in the state of New Hampshire could follow and make other things that were fermented and not have to be having grapes in it. So that was one of the first substantial things that I learned the hard way. I've had an awful lot of challenges with labels and TTP and trying to understand what's an advertisement and what's not an advertisement, and how do you tie your Twitter account to have your state and country and all this kind of stuff. But there's not like there's a playbook like, oh, dear new winery, here you go. No, what they hand you is the CFR, right? So here you go, read through 20,000 pages and best of luck. Making alcohol means you need permission before you do anything. So, it's what I've learned over the years, what I'm most happy about is to become creative, to think outside the box. Like we're starting our new venture, Hidden Moon Brewing Company, which we've been trying to launch for the last 3 or 4 years. We had a beer brewed by Smutty Nose Brewing Company's Portsmouth Brewery at one time, or one batch. I've done collaborations with brewers all over the world, a couple over in Australia. Got one that was supposed to be happening in Switzerland this year, probably next year. That's the way that's going to look like. And all over the United States, from Stone Brewing Company to Heretic Brewing Company to Urban Chestnut, way back in the day with White Birch Brewing Company here in New Hampshire. So beer has always been a passion of mine. And so what I figured out is that I could get a federal wholesaler license for import-export. And that means that if I have the right DBA, right, doing business as Hidden Moon Brewing Company, I can license that name to a licensed brewer, and they can brew a beer under my licensed name. I can then wholesale it back from them and then turn around and sell it to my wholesalers or have it here on my tasting room. So we're going to be adding our beer options rather within the next 2 weeks. So it's been a long time coming. A lot of my fan base are homebrewers from all over the country. I've talked many times at the National Homebrewers Conference. And what I've always tried to give is everything I know, right? Not trying to hold back, not trying to say you can't come into my meadery and take pictures or ask me questions, or, I'm approachable. I may be grumpy, but I'm approachable. And, most people might know me with no hair, and, here I am letting my hair grow out. So I've kind of found a new stress relief, let my hair grow and see how curly it can get. My wife has never seen me with curly hair. Or wavy hair, but it's kind of I'm all in. I've always been an all-in player. I get the mentality it takes to get to that next level, and it's like growing a garden. You don't quit when you get the stalks coming up, right? We're at the point where everything's sowed, there's stocks in the ground, you know, the hail is coming, we're putting up the tents around the garden, we're doing it, we're smokers out there, we've got everything protecting it. And on March 16th, I was out looking at a farm that we were thinking about potentially buying to put our new destination location. And I came back from that meeting and I got my first phone call of the day to cancel all invoices. And that happened all day long. By the end of the day, I had to let my entire staff go overnight. My things at my farm are completely on hold at this point in time. You know, we've used that money to stay afloat, and we're working, you know, with the various government agencies and SBA to get as much covered as we can. I think we're going to make it through this storm, but, you know, some of my distributors are still under, you know, stay-at-home orders and no real sales going through. Nobody's buying expensive mead at this point in time. They want some of the more canned session meads that we've been making, and that's an option for us. But, you know, it's a challenge because now the label companies are full up working 3 shifts a day. You know, your canning companies are starting to run out of 12-ounce cans because nobody's kegging anything anymore. So there's a lot more volume going into those grocery store stacks and piles of cans that are sitting on the shelves.
Yeah, and going back to something you said earlier that's always impressed me about you, you don't let the rules get in the way. If the rules don't make sense, you go after changing them. And you and I have spent time together on the floor of the legislators, speaking to the legislators and the different committees around different laws that we've worked together on getting changed. You're helping shape the industry. Like you said, there isn't a playbook for how to start a meadery, but or any of the things really that we're doing here in New Hampshire. This is really a young industry in this state. So you're helping actually write that playbook. So the folks coming up behind you are going to have first of an easier ride because you've opened up the doors in places that the doors were closed before, and you've written some of that playbook so that people can come to you or others in the industry that have already walked down that path and help people get started. So I have a lot of respect for you for that. That's really one of the things that's most inspiring about the people that we work with in this industry is that for the most part, people are really generous with their time and they don't see each other as competitors. And we're trying to help everybody succeed here. So that's great. And it's a challenging road. I mean, we've been down some of the same paths that you're going down, so we're aware. We're in a very different place than you, but nonetheless, some of the same challenges. I'm gonna just take a real quick break from the questions and just look over and see who we got joining us today. Let's see. We got Matt. Hi, Matt. Good to see you. Matt's joined us for many of these presentations, and oh, Ken's joined us. Good. Hi, Ken. Hope you're enjoying our conversation. And Matt Trahan says hi, Mike. Joseph Tabby and Jen Eaton have joined us. So let's see. I don't see any questions. No questions at the moment, so we'll get back to our interview. And again, if you guys have questions out there, feel free to ask. We'll do the best we can to get them answered. So, all right. So let's see. Moving on to my next question. So, I think some of this was answered, but I'll ask it anyway. You've rocketed to a great deal of success from like I said, going from garage to selling your mead all over the world. And I think we could say right off the bat from what you've said that hard work is probably the backbone of what's got you there. But what are some of the other things that have made you be able to grow as you have? And I think we can just also go without saying the quality of your product is certainly at the top of the list for the reason that you've been able to grow that you have. But what else? Anything else?
It's just this never-ending drive to want this to succeed. I mean, you can walk into restaurants or, you know, I learned firsthand how to try to sell my product here in New Hampshire. Right, I was going door to door. Right, I went into Jim LaCourse's office at Market Basket, and you know, I used to deliver mail to Jim's father way back when I was 16. Right. So there's Market Basket is a very, very awesome customer to us. They've we supported them when they were having their tiff with the takeover thing, and but same is true with the Liquor Commission. Right? The Liquor Commission just placed an order today that's like a whole state placing an order, and they only carry 6 of our meads. So it's that looking people in the eye, shaking their hand, and being honest, and telling them what you can and can't do, right? And making a product that you believe in. I met with the owner of Lucky's, which is a bourbon bar in Melbourne, and he was looking at the labels, tasting the product. He said, "Michael, your product's phenomenal." He says, "Your labels suck." He says, "But that's a good problem because you can fix your labels." And so if you were to come look at where we were 10 years ago, where I had taken Adobe Photoshop to modify the moon and put a blurring effect on it, pick whatever font that I could have, and go forward to today where we have a team of people working on design concepts and labels, and I still try to come up with a lot of the names myself, but I've really tried to keep the beer world's really focused on men, and nobody's really focused on women. And so, I've come up with these names, and a lot of the sales guys who work in a male-dominated industry for trying to sell beer to men felt pretty silly trying to sell these kegs of Sensual, for example, or Fling into a bar, right? Do you want to walk into a biker bar? Hey, I got a keg of Sensual mead from Moonlight Meadery. What the is that, right? So, I put together this gentleman's email into a satirical little commentary and posted it up on our Facebook page, and it flatlined every other ounce of history we ever had. You see your spikes like, oh, okay, I did something right here, I should follow this. Well, everything else was now down to 0. You couldn't see any other history because there were like 20,000 comments and shares of this one post that I had. So, it reinforces the position I've taken, which is, making a product that's named and marketed towards women isn't anything to be ashamed of. It's something that I believe in, right? I believe with all my heart the story of how we came up with Desire. I was chasing my desire. At the time I was just recently starting to date and become engaged now, married to Bernice, my partner in crime here, and for 8 years, she's been right at my side. She's lugged cases of mead up and down. And in the early days, the case was 24 bottles. So that was like 44 pounds a piece. And lugging them up and down the back staircases of bars in Boston. And she was killing it. And she still kills it. So I've enjoyed the perks of the job. I certainly, have sometimes stress and challenges with it. But, again, as you can see the equipment behind me, 3,000-gallon wooden barrels, 2 of them. That's for making our barrel-aged cider. And then you see the fermenters over the other side of my shoulder. This equipment is not cheap, and we're looking to buy a full mono block so that we'll be able to double the number of bottles that we're making. And my rationale for doing that is so that I can potentially drive the cost down so I can make better quality mead available at an even better price point to a market.
So let's talk about your mead. How many products now do you produce on an annual basis?
We have 60 in the tasting room. And I've probably got another 30 in barrels. Some of the meads that we're going to release this year in particular, one will be 10 years old. So it spent 10 years in a Boston, or in what was once a bourbon barrel that went to Sam Adams for their Utopias. And we make a mead called Utopian. So this mead will be released in December, and it'll be 10 years in the barrel. So in general, I like to play around, really come up with new flavors. It's really my creative whims, if you will. And that's really the motivation for a lot of what I've done. Like last year, I made a cucumber mead just for the Homebrewers Conference. it was a lime and cucumber. It took me about a week to 2 weeks to make. So it was really meant to be a nice quick mead type of thing. And it had this nice light cucumber and water effervescence to it that really kind of worked out interestingly. Yeah, I've been threatening it. Someday I'll make a salsa mead, like tomatoes, cilantro, and lime, and maybe a little herbs or something.
You share some of that inspiration with Ken. Ken's made a cucumber wine. He's got a tomato wine. So that's
Nice.
funny. They don't end up being necessarily our best sellers, but they're fun and you learn a lot. So
yeah, we've had a few duds that haven't really won the crowds over, but for the most part, our bottles price ranges here at the Meadery from $16 a bottle up to $150, and that's all 375 milliliter price points. And we released our bourbon barrel Kurt's apple pie this last December. That's been flying off the shelf. No Need to Argue, which is the mead that won the Best of Show at the San Diego Festival. It's a beautiful cranberry mead named after the Cranberries album, No Need to Argue. So, trying to pay homage to inspiration where I can find it. And it's fun.
I got to tell you too, I'm looking forward to trying that 10-year-old mead you're about to release. I don't know how many of your guests or our audience has had a chance to try an aged mead, but we have a few laying around in our cellar from about 10 years ago that are just amazing. That what time does it? It's the one ingredient that you actually can add. You got to just be patient and wait for it. So it's really special. So I look forward to try that.
Yeah, my importer from Australia sent me a 40-year-old bottle of mead as a gift. Wow. And I got to share that with a friend that we co-brewed a batch of mead, which was our pineapple chipotle mead, Scott Shar, with my son and my wife at the house. And it's unlike anything you've ever tasted. You try the age complexity is really just, it's not like an oxidized flavor, but it's more of it's the totality of that beverage that really kind of takes it to a new level.
Yeah. So first, what are your customers' favorites? What's your best seller or sellers?
It's moved a bit. So typically Kurt's apple pies are historically #1 bestseller. We've moved more bottles of that than anything else we make. That's a mead that's made with apple cider, honey. Then we add Vietnamese cinnamon and Madagascar bourbon vanilla beans to it. So it smells and tastes like an apple pie. I mean, it clearly does. I recall one of the previous retired winemakers in the state telling me once he mistakenly got some of my mead in a glass and he had to tell me it was actually pretty good. And
who's Kurt?
Kurt's my best friend. So Kurt taught me how to bag groceries back in 1982. So August 11th, I'd left the restaurant to go work bagging groceries. And here this kid was, and he was the fastest bagger at the grocery store. Right? It was paper bags. He showed me how you layer a bag, so there was science to it. Right? You start with the construction of the foundation, and then you work your way up. But he could throw hand to hand, throw stuff into that bag in such a methodical way. And I've always been this competitive guy, and I'm like, I can do this. I can be better than him. Right? And so we became best friends, and we've always been very competitive. At first, it was cars. He had a Ford Mustang 67 convertible. I had a Maverick, so he won. Then it was college and careers and everything. And I think I might have won in the long run here because now I'm running my own company and having the time of my life. But he's a great guy. I still love to see him, and we talk about mead making. So back in So how the Kurt's apple pie came about. So about 96, Kurt came over to the house with a bottle of mead that he made. He said, Mike, you got to try it. It tastes like apple pie. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Right. So I put the bottle in my basement and I didn't get to it. We were actually trying to make a porter that day. And I think we ended up burning it because we might have been enjoying a little off the kegerator at the same time. But about a year goes by and I see this bottle in my basement. I'm trying to remember what bottle it was because it wasn't labeled or anything. And I pull out the cork and I smell that bottle. I'm like, dang it. It smells like apple pie. And I take a sip and I'm like, wow, this is the best tasting thing I've ever tried in my entire life. Now, I drank the whole bottle. And it was a 750 milliliter bottle, probably at about 16% alcohol. And, my fireplace was right next to where my chair was at the time, and I just took a nap. I was out for the night. And the next day I called him back. I said, buddy, I need another bottle. He says, no. I said, Kurt, I'll give you $100 for one bottle. That was amazing. He said, Michael, it wasn't my last bottle, but I don't have any more. And I'm like, you got to make some. He goes, yeah, I'll make some more. I've known that line since 1982. Means he's never going to do it. But in 2010, when I quit my day job to start my company, Kurt came over to the house with a bottle of cider that I made back in 1995. And I'm looking at this dot matrix printed label, and I'd use milk as the glue to paste it onto the bottle. And I'm looking at him and I go, why have you kept this for so long? He said, Michael, you've always made the best mead I've ever had. I knew you were going to go pro someday, and I wanted to hang on to this till the day you did. He said, if I can ever do anything for you and your company, you tell me. I looked him in the eye, I said, I'll take that apple pie recipe. And he gave it to me. So that's why his name's on the bottle.
That's fantastic. That's a great story. I'm glad you shared that, because I've known about that product for a long time, but I've never known the history. So maybe that's it, but is there another mead that you make that really rises to the top as your favorite?
Oh, Smitten is right up there. So Smitten is a peach mead. We were given some organic peach puree. A company that had bought it for what they were going to use it for had more than they needed, and didn't want to have to destroy it. So they asked if I could use it. I was like, well, the answer is always yes. Just tell me where I'm going to sign up and what do I have to do and make sure it's still okay and everything. So I ended up with like 12 5-gallon buckets of this peach puree. And so I made this heavily laden fruit peach mead. It's probably got close to 6 pounds per gallon of peaches in it. And the peach note just screams when you smell it. And I'm so proud of this mead. I took it with us to Belgium last year. We were pouring our mead at the Oostleven Beer Festival held by Destrucey in Belgium. And it's 2 days, 12 hours a day. And I had some monks coming up from, nearby monastery to enjoy some of my meads. And, these guys are in their late 80s and they're walking around with white socks and flip-flops, more or less, or sandals, I guess is the right, not flip-flops. But, and it was just to die for. And, I still love that sense of being able to share. I mean, one of the things that, my fellow homebrewers used to complain about when I'd go to a homebrew club venue where we were pouring our club beers is I always wanted to be the guy behind the bar. I wanted to be the guy doing the interactions. And, it's just because I love to see that smile in somebody's eye when they taste something I make. And that's kind of what I like about it.
So you're going to be, you already talked about Hidden Moon Brewing. So you've already been making braggots. Is it braggots or braggarts? Right? How do you pronounce it?
Well, I'm no expert, but I think it's B-R-O-G-G-O-T or B-R-A-G-O-T-T-T or something to that effect. So I pronounce it braggot.
Braggot. Okay, so you've been making braggots for a long time, and you've partnered with other brewers because you can't brew them yourself at the meadery because of a licensing issue. And so you've gotten around that, and you're going to be contract brewing your braggot now with another brewer, and maybe someday you're going to have that. You're going to set yourself up so you can make it yourself. Not everybody knows what a braggot is. In fact, I don't even know if I've ever had one myself. So tell us about braggots.
So it's basically a mead that has malt in it as well. Now, the federal government does not allow you to blend a beer and a wine together. So I can't legally make a braggot that way. Now, if I were to go to Belgium, I could bring a tote of my mead over and they can make a beautiful IPA or a stout or a lambic, and we can blend the two of them, and I could legally bring it back to the United States and sell it. But I can't make it. So what are my options? So my options are, and this is part of what I've taught at the National Honey Board's beer symposium, is we can add the honey to the beer during either fermentation or at knockoff. You don't want to boil honey because of the aromatics. But when we start in the whirlpool, if we've modified the mash temperature a little bit so that we can get some residual sweetness from the malt, the honey will actually ferment fairly dry. So we get the perception of sweetness from the honey, even though the honey's sugars are pretty much all consumed. It gives us a way of making this beer with honey. So the first one that we're going to come out with is a IPA. So it's a IPA with honey. There's legal definitions of what you can call a beer in the United States. The word braggot doesn't really mean much in the official reference guide. The word mead means a lot, so you can't call it mead. And I can't usually tell people on the side of a label in the puffery that I am the mead maker, because if it's not a mead, which is honey and water, I'm not a mead maker. So I'm other than standard mead maker or a fruit mead maker or a fruit and spice mead maker, but I can't say the term mead maker like all my colleagues in the rest of the world think of themselves as, because of legal definitions. But so it's basically a portion of the fermentables that go into making the beverage is from honey instead of from just malt.
Where does a braggot originate? It's not an American thing, is it?
No, probably Europe. And I think I know this stuff off the top of my head. That's a good question. I don't know. It might be England or Ireland or in the Poland area. But it's basically, when they were making beer back in the early days, they take anything that would ferment possible. Brown sugar, molasses, whatever. And the German purity law kind of really trying to refine that so that people weren't throwing rice and whatever that could kill somebody into a beer. But so this concept of honey as a sugar, but honey is really expensive sugar to use. So if you're making a braggot, you're not going to expect it to be cheap, because it's the fermentables, and we're bringing in certified organic honey from Brazil to make the ones we're making. I haven't quite talked to my brewer to see if they want to go through the process of becoming certified organic. Part of the challenge that we're a certified organic winery. People don't really care when you're consuming alcohol. They don't care so much if it's certified organic. It's not like they're jogging down the street and want the best whatever. So it's kind of been another interesting learning curve for us.
So when can we buy our first braggot from you?
I should have it available for sale on August, assuming everything goes well with the Liquor Commission and my contracts and everything, we should have it by June 9th for sale here at the Meadery and Hidden Moon Brewing Company. We just opened up our beer Mead Cider garden, so you can actually come down and enjoy beverages and our meads. Don't be confused that a wine's not a beverage. That's, again, the government being crazy. Everything you've been taught in school is not true anymore. Wine is not a beverage. It's taxed differently, it's treated differently, but that's the rules we play with.
So that brings me to the next topic. So I know this pandemic has affected all of us and everybody in the world in ways we never could have imagined. What are some of the things that you're doing at Moonlight Meadery to continue to make your products available in the best way you can to your customers, to maintain your relationships with your customers? It sounds like you have an outdoor eating area. What are some of the things you're doing for your customers?
Yeah, we've offered curbside pickup. We've really tried to offer my time to homebrew clubs across the country with Zoom meetings. So I've done a number of these so far all across the country, where for about an hour's worth of my time, I'll jump in and answer questions. Last night we did a virtual tasting. So members of the club had bought each 2 bottles, one of each flavor. It happened to be our best single day of sales ever on Vino Shipper. So we were really quite shocked to see that happen. We're trying to get as much production work done with the PPP system in place as possible. So, to a company, the cost of labor is a very steep endeavor. Raw materials are also expensive, but, it's money in the bank once it's bottled, more or less. So by, in the 8-week period, we'll have canned and bottled 60,000 bottles over that 8 weeks. So, I expect to be ahead of the game once all the markets open back up, but I'm really trying to plan for future success, because I do want to get back to dreaming about having a farm someday and my own brewery and indoor outdoor garden area and beehives. And my wife likes to call it the beehive to bistro.
So do you think will Moonlight Meadery, as it is now, move to a farm location someday, or do you think you'll have two operations?
I think we'll have one operation. We'll probably move. The challenge for me is, I'm paying a lot of lease rent, rent. And, 10 years in, looking at that kind of money, that's substantial money. And, it's well into the six figures, almost seven. So, that's money that, doesn't go towards my retirement ever. And so I want to dream of, building a nest egg and a generational business, and, as this pandemic has shown, it could go away overnight. Really, March 17th, I was pretty lonely. And by the April 17th, I was just as lonely, sitting in my tasting room, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I'm pretty thankful that, I have such a large customer base, and that people with some means have really kind of shown up and said, don't worry about what you need. Tell me what we can do to help. And
it's great.
It's been inspirational.
Are any of the changes that you've made as a result of this actually going to become permanent fixtures of your operation?
I'd love to see that happen. The town of Londonderry was definitely pretty particularly accurate on this is temporary and that, we'll see type of thing. But, I think, I just dropped another several $1,000s to fit up our tasting area outside, from all the ropes and the fences, and having it look nice and be, carry that experience of Moonlight. We are trying to work on seeing if we can get some live performing artists out there for music and venues and such. I had to create a website reservation system on the fly this week. I've got two canning dates scheduled for June 8th, so I got to get that product into tank and made. But I'm running fairly short staffed, as my production manager is homeschooling his children. So, even though we have the resources to bring them back, I can't come back, right? Well, I'm going to go hire a babysitter too. So it's as any business owner will tell you, there's 1,000 moving pieces.
I know, and I don't know about you, but I feel like since this thing is March 17th for us too, I have worked harder in the last 2 months than I think I worked getting my business off the ground 10 years ago, and more hours, and it's amazing. We're like having to reinvent ourselves. I don't know does it feel that way for you?
Yeah, it's how much more creative can I become, right? So it's like, I think I do a good job, but now I'm like, well, why didn't I start doing these Zoom meetings like 4 or 5 months ago? I mean, this is great. So, I'm trying to, think of, what do I do and what do I do differently? And, how do I play and keep that motivation there? I mean, I've worked 7 days a week for the last 2 months straight, without time off, without anything other than 6 a.m. I'm coming into work. It's getting dark, I'm heading home. But it's been hard.
Yeah, it has. I concur. But we'll get through this. We will.
True.
So I think it's fair to say that you have probably played one of the most critical roles in the U.S. anyway for making mead a household name. I have to tell you, we've been giving tours at Hermit Woods Winery since I don't know, 7, 8 years now. Actually, our tour was inspired by you. Was you sort of suggested that we take that angle. And when I first gave tours, we would talk about our meads, and I would always ask the tour group, 10 or 12 people, anybody heard of a mead? And maybe 1 out of 10 people would raise their hand as having heard of a mead. I think it's completely flipped when I do tours now and I ask that question. it's maybe one person out of the group that doesn't know what a mead is.
Nice.
And I think you are responsible largely for that. I think when you started, there were, I don't know, maybe 50 meaderies in the country or something. And now what is there, 800?
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but well, I appreciate you saying that, Bob. It certainly means a lot to me, and you're not the first that, from Sergio down in New Jersey with Melavino and Lost Cause. No, I'm not spacing on his name right now, but they're old age. But there have been many people that have had this conversation, and that's part of the reason I got into taking over the American Mead Makers Association, to really kind of help get it onto the footing that it's on now. And the American Mead Makers Association had failed for several tries before, and we were at a critical point of trying to get this to this next level, and we needed to show smooth transition. And when my 2 years was up, I let it go. I stepped back because I was confident in the people that I built and put on the board to carry it to that next level. And I've been focused more on my own company for the last few years, because what nobody tells you is when you grow a company really fast, it costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of resources. I mean, you always want to be positive. You always want to be, but there's house payments behind me. Big ones. And it's. I do appreciate that, to get mentioned about that. I mean, I don't think I've done it all myself. I certainly leaned on many before me, but I know that many have come after me. And I used to run the Mead for Your Die competition here in New Hampshire. The guys at Sap House and myself and Jason and Margot at Ancient Fire, have all just been, I tell people about other meaderies all the time. And it's because there's so much diversity to it. It's not the same. It's never going to be the same. I could give everybody every recipe I've ever had, and I could get back 1,000 different variants to what I make. So it's
I had a thought that was in line with what you were just saying.
Billy Belt was the name for Lost Cause. But Billy and Susanna took us out for dinner when we were out in San Diego last time.
So that brings me to the next question. So you've done a lot of traveling. You've been all over the world. You visited winemakers and mead makers and brewers. Is there a particular place or trip that stands out as pretty special, that or experience that stands out as pretty special in all those travels?
South America's got to be way up there. Now, Bernice and I liked Australia too quite a bit, but it's a 24-hour flight from New Hampshire to get to Melbourne. But the trip down to Argentina and Uruguay, the food, the people, just the whole ambiance. I got to spend a week with Pete Schlossberg and his wife, and Peter's the guy that created Pete's Wicked Ales, right? And so, really famous, at least if you're old enough, beer brewer who's done what I'm trying to do, and I get to put up in a private hotel. So my wife and I got picked up from the airport, and they had me autograph a keg, so I knew I was at least in the right car. We don't speak very much Spanish, but we get in the car, and the car takes off. Now, my wife had told me we were supposed to be staying in La Plata, and we're circling around saying, don't worry about the names. So we're circling around this other town and the roads, and I'm going with my GPS, like, we're not going to the right place. And so the gentleman pulls up this hill, and stops. And he goes, 1 minute. I'm looking at my wife, and looking at him. He leaves the door open, and he runs away. And I'm sitting in the back of this car going, I'm about to get hijacked. I'm like, what is really happening here? And just as I'm getting out of the car, right, because it's a long flight, and you're going through customs and everything, and we're just happy to get into a car and heading towards relief of a restaurant at some point somewhere. But I'm in the back of a car, and I'm like, oh, you're killing me. So I'm getting out of the car, and this gentleman comes running up. Mr. Fairbrother, it's okay. You're here. I'm like, where's here? He goes, oh, this is my hotel. I'm looking at the place and going, this looks like a nondescript office building. He goes, yeah, come on inside. I walk in the front door, and it's a palatial palace. I mean, the outside, you'd have no idea. There was a restaurant in there. There was, we got brought into our rooms. There were no locks on anything in the entire hotel. It was probably a 150-year-old hotel. But he walked us back down to the restaurant area, and he's like, anything you need, anything, any booze, any beers, anything. And I got 2 more restaurants down the road, anything. And then he starts handing out $100 bills or pesos or whatever. And he's like, the ATMs don't work so good here. You're like family to me now. You're going to be here. And this is Martin Boone. And he's a famous author down in South America on beer and brewing. And good God, did these folks make me feel just like I'd landed on another planet. I mean, I spent most of my career in software engineering, and I never got that kind of treatment.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing. I also remembered what I was going to comment on before. You talked about how hard you work and how long it takes to make a profit in this industry. I heard a podcast with Gary Hirschberger from Stonyfield Yogurt earlier today, and talk about a ride, man. I think he went 16 years and went $2.5 million in debt before he made his first dollar of profit.
So that's wonderful. I'm following in his footsteps.
Yeah, so we can feel a little better about where we're at when you hear those stories. But he, of course, as we all know, went on to do extremely well for himself and grow quite a company. So there's still hope. Hang on. So that's a great story of your travels. I also imagine that you have a rather nice collection of wines and meads and beers in your cellar. Outside of the ones that you've made, is there a particular mead or wine or beverage sitting in your cellar that you are so excited about sharing with or sharing on some very special occasion?
Yeah, I've got several.
I bet.
So my beer cellar used to be several $1,000s worth of beer because I was a collector and I liked old things. I've got some 1997 J.W. Lees still sticking around in my beer cellar. So those are pretty rare and hard to come by these days. And, mostly for saving for friends when we can get back to gathering and being social. Intermeal, Andre Robb, who makes some phenomenal meads out of Canada. Those are always some of my go-tos for when I'm not reaching for one of my own. I did the first year we were in production. I saved a bottle of each one of the first batches for Bernice. So we've got some 10-year-old mead now sitting down up in the basement these days. But yeah, I do like to hold back. I turned 50 4 years ago, and at that time I had a 50-year-old Armagnac and a 50-year-old port that I opened up for my birthday party and the guests that I had amassed. And when this is all back to the world's back to normal and we got a vaccine in place, there's got to be an epic party, like we've never seen before.
Well, I look forward to that. I hope I get an invite. That would be fun. I think a lot of people are going to be having epic parties when this thing is finally over. Let's see. This is my next question. So I ask everybody this. This may sound a little strange, but have you figured out what you want to be when you grow up?
So the game plan is to have a meadery down in the Caribbean. We want to be able to have a small little venue that'll be like get off the boat and you go do a tour of maybe Lunar Society or something. I haven't come up with a name yet, but that's kind of the vision that we're futzing around with it. As retirement could be any day now, and I want to enjoy the life that I've been given and blessed with so far. But I got some commitments here. I gotta get the ship righted right now and really steer it towards success. But once we get that accomplished, I do want to find a future home for a small little venue offshoot, more or less, the Twisted Barrel or something. I don't know, because I want to get every drop of it out.
Well, that's great. Well, good luck with that. I hope that happens, and I'll look forward to visiting you down in the Caribbean and trying some of your mead with you. That will be great. I don't, do they make mead in the Caribbean right now, or is there any meaderies down there?
There's one in Costa Rica. Michael has a pretty nice setup going there. But if you figure the world, 99% still has no idea what mead is. And, if I
Yeah,
can become a 3-hour destination location, and part of what I've learned with Moonlight is that it's about the experience. You don't just, oh, okay, this is the vat, this is the thing. You build the story and you get
right.
the customer to be part of the story. I heard Amy talking about experiences, and that's so true. That's how you succeed, because you involve your customer and they become champions for you. It's not just you fighting up this uphill battle and telling all customers, "You're wrong, get away." No, that's not how you do it. It's there's a lot to life, and enjoying and understanding how to make it all successful. My outlook and how do I view my success and what can I give back doesn't always align with everybody else's view of, well, I made it to the top and here's what I'm going to do. I've got a very humble beginning to, pretty sheltered life, more or less, really good parents, both still with me, went to college, worked my ass off in software, but there's this work ethic that I have of hard work pays off, means something to me.
So, so that really begs the next question. Is there ever a time you're not working and you're just off doing something that you really enjoy, other than making beer and wine? What would that be?
I'm really enjoying some hiking these days. So my wife and I have discovered a whole new set of trails around different parts of the Lake Massabesic watershed that we never knew existed. And, kind of, back when I was on my, I used to do some trail bike riding, and, I'd go by some of these trails. And I'm like, oh, that was kind of cool. And I wanted to kind of go back there at some point, and never really knew how to get there without driving 10 miles into the woods. But we found some new trailheads that we've really been enjoying. Some good 2-hour walks, but, mid 50s and not taking care of myself. So I'm trying to start moving with the momentum in the other direction.
That's great. My wife and I have been doing a lot of walking together since this started as well. It feels good to get out there and take a break and clear your head a little bit.
Yeah, I got to sit outside today in my tasting area with my laptop, and not a single bug was hassling me. I'm like, that doesn't happen. So moon-free or bug-free Moonlight Meadery.
Maybe the bugs are quarantining too. Wouldn't that be nice? So, have I missed anything? We've talked about a lot of stuff, and I know there's some things I probably could have or should have asked, and things that maybe you want to say. Is there anything you can think of that you'd like to share before we bring this to a close?
Well, I love the community that we're in. Here in New Hampshire, New England is such a small geographic territory. You never know who you're going to know and meet. And, some of the guests you mentioned earlier on, these are people I know by name. So, they make impacts in people's lives, and I appreciate it.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. I know you're hardworking, and taking an hour out to share your story with us is much appreciated. And so, thank you. And I wish you the best with all of the challenges you're facing getting through this pandemic. I know you'll get through it, like all of us. Eventually, we'll get through this. But you, of anybody, as hardworking as you are, I know you'll figure it out, and you'll get to the other side. So
yeah, I've got a great family and a great team. So it's appreciate it. Bob,
that's great. So just to recap, if you did ask questions that we did not get to during the interview, Michael and I will get to the questions as soon as we close the interview. Thank you, everybody out there, for taking time out of your day to join us and learn a little bit about Moonlight Meadery and what Michael Fairbrother has been doing. And I hope you all stay well, stay healthy, and we'll all look forward to seeing you all again in our tasting rooms sometime soon. Have a good evening, Michael.
Cheers, Bob.
Take care. Thank you for watching our video today. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments section below. If you would like to see more videos like this, click the subscribe button or visit our webpage to see a list of all upcoming events and watch previously recorded interviews and presentations. From all of us here at Hermit Woods, thank you for watching. Be well and stay safe.